Let me go on to the other phone lines and bring in Felix Kwakye. He is aide to former President John Dramani Mahama. Mr. Kwakye, good evening to you and thank you for joining us on Eyewitness News. I'm pretty much aware that you've listened to the explanation Richard Ahiagba has given. In fact, he says that all these things that the former president is saying is just to find a flimsy excuse not to attend any of the national events.
Well, Richard can say whatever he wants. He belongs to the group that has contrived to collapse our country. There is pretty much very little to celebrate about a 66-year-old country that is totally bankrupt. That is, in fact, expropriating monies lent to it by its own citizens. Now, when a country goes so bankrupt that its government refuses to pay its own citizens, who depend on the interest and principal payment from bonds that he has given to it, then you know that there is very little or nothing to celebrate. So what the former president said was self-explanatory. He was lucid and he was clear as crystal. Apart from the fact that there is nothing to celebrate, President Akufo-Addo lives in the delusional bubble. And he believes that somehow there is something to celebrate. We should sing Kumbaya. We should count our blessings and praise God and be happy, make merry, eat, drink, and feast and dance and beat drums because he has collapsed our economy and destroyed our country. We in the NDC will not be part of such a shameful display of lack of judgment on the part of the president. So if the president and his NPP believe that the most important thing at this point of our country's history, where Ghanaians are struggling to make ends meet, where people are struggling to ascertain where the next meal will come from, where people cannot afford the cost of living, where parents are struggling to pay for the items on prospecti that run into over 5,000 Ghana cedis per child so that their work can go to secondary school. At a time when old men and women who have served this country for years and have gone on retirement have to demonstrate against a debt exchange program that threatens their very survival and livelihood. That is up to him. And we in the NDC will not be part of it. In any event, the former president is not interested in attending a party jamboree. What President Akufo-Addo and Richard Ahiagba like to describe as Independence Day celebration is nothing more than a glorified NPP rally with soldiers and security personnel in attendance. And the former president does not believe that that atmosphere bodes well for a national celebration of this magnitude. What you find is that the president and his government and his party continue to display shocking levels of pettiness and excessive partisanship, so that they don't know how to draw a distinction between a national celebration and an NPP rally. And I heard Richard go on and on and on about how President Mahama wanted to avoid the Volta region. Only a few days ago, President Mahama launched his campaign in the Volta region. So he has enormous respect for the people of the Volta region. That is the region that forms the bulwark of the NDC's electoral success. So the former president is not about to disrespect that region. But that region cannot be used as an excuse to gloss over important national matters that should seize and engage the attention of the president, his government, and his party. You would have thought that after all the difficulties that we have, the president will heed the complaints and suggestions of Ghanaians. He has turned a blind eye. The simple, basic things that he has to do to get this country running again and to get us out of the mess that he has superintended, he is refusing to do. Yes, Richard Ahiagba is waxing lyrical about patriotism and why there is a need to celebrate. Who wants to celebrate with a government that has no compunction overseeing the gunning down of 8 of its own citizens because elections are being held? Who wants to be part of celebrations being held by a government that has no difficulty putting NPP terrorists in uniforms, arming them to attack its own citizens because there's a by-election and as West Ogun? How can a government that has crumbled our economy, systematically demolished the prospects of our economy in the manner that President Akufo-Addo, Alhaji Bawumia, and Kanu Prata have done, ever expect Ghanaians should be enthused about a celebration like this at a time when they are not even sure what they are going to eat this evening. So please, the NPP can continue to stay in their delusional bubble and believe that all is well and kosher. Indeed, only a few weeks ago, the finance minister was in parliament asking the people of Ghana to rejoice in the Lord after collapsing the economy. Today, discussing the president says we should count our blessings. But we look all around us, and instead of a blessing, we see a curse that is called the Akufo-Addo Bawumia government.
But well, the blessing the president is talking about, actually, Felix, if you can indulge me a bit, he said that at least Ghanaians are not queuing for fuel, they are not queuing for food, and they are not even experiencing erratic power supply, otherwise known as doomsday. So despite the many challenges that have confronted the country, Ghanaians should be grateful because...
So we should be grateful because we pay almost 7 times what we paid only 6 years ago for fuel. We should be grateful because now we pay 13 cedis per liter for fuel. When we used to pay just above 3 cedis 6 years ago before President Akufo-Addo became president. And this is the sort of delusional bubble that the president has buried his head in that I'm referring to. How can any president look in the eyes of his own people and tell them that we should be enthused simply because you can go to the fuel station and find fuel? Why? Don't you buy the fuel that we find at the fuel station? Or does the president give it to us for free? And if he looks at the cost at which we buy this fuel, is there something to applaud himself over? And then he speaks about doomsday. Why? What has he done to resolve doomsday? Indeed, given how shambolic he has been, I dare say that if he had ever inherited doomsday, there is no way we would be out of it by now. He is just fortunate that his predecessor, who, unlike him, takes responsibility for national problems, took responsibility for doomsday, and did what had to be done to resolve the crisis. Doomsday was resolved 1 whole year before President Akufo-Addo set foot in the Jubilee House. So he must respect the sensibilities of the people of Ghana, whose livelihoods he has destroyed with hopeless incompetence, and stop repeating the pedestrian propaganda of his party. They must refrain from creating the impression that they are doing us a favor simply because private individuals can import fuel and come and sell it to us. In any event, what is the role of government in the importation of fuel? Is it not BDCs, bulk distribution companies, which are private entities and profit-oriented, who mobilize capital, go and buy this fuel and come and sell it to us? So on what basis must the president be applauded for this? What is his role in it? Recently, they've been making noise about some gold for oil deal, which has had absolutely no impact on the price of fuel at the pump. In any event, is it not his family and friends who are profiting from the electricity subsector? Have they not formed companies overnight that are being paid hundreds of millions of Ghana cedis because there's a blanket order that only those companies should import fuel to fire our thermal plants? So indeed, rather than applaud him, we should be condemning him for creating conditions for his family and friends to profit from the high levels of electricity rates that people are paying. So we are in no mood to entertain pedestrian propaganda on the part of the president or any of his spokespersons. Indeed, instead of a national celebration, we should have sat in ashes and worn sackcloth and mourned. What we are experiencing now is worth 40 days of national mourning, not celebration. Indeed, in other countries, they have driven out their president out of anger. But he is fortunate to have people who are forbearing and are patient and have not vented their spleen on him. Rather than take a cue of this and act as a leader should be acting, he has buried his head in the sand like an ostrich and is pretending that all is well and is calling on us to count blessings when all we see around us is a curse.
But he also says that, in fact, he's been able to manage the economic quagmire much better and that Ghanaians should be expecting some reprieve soon. Where do you stand in this reiteration of his...
No, what is the president talking about? What is the president talking about? How can a president tell us that he has managed his economy well? Which economy that is managed well leads to bankruptcy? My brother, as we speak, we are bankrupt. In fact, only last week it emerged that we failed to pay interest of $34 million to some external creditors. And because of that, they have had to draw on some insurance premium that was put in place to mitigate a happening like this. We are at a juncture where we have hyperinflation. Inflation is about 53%. Interest rates are about 45%. The Citi has lost over 20% of its value since the beginning of this year alone. In the first 10 months of last year, it lost 54%. It has moved from 6 cities in January 2022 to 14 cities as I speak to you. How can any leader who supervises this catastrophic collapse of an economy tell us that he is managing it well? Indeed, how has he managed it? Is it not the case that he has expropriated 82 billion Ghana cedis of money that Ghanaians have lent to him and his government in the expectation that they will pay back with interest? If you take 82 billion Ghana cedis from old men and women and individuals, you do not mount platforms and tell us that you've managed the economy well. He and his team have been the worst government this country has seen. They have completely destroyed the Ghanaian economy. And in the wake of that, they have thrust Ghanaians into the most excruciating hardships in the history of this country. That, like I said, he should be wearing sackcloth and sitting in ash and crying and mourning and asking for forgiveness, not mounting podiums to rub salt in our injury by making claims that are completely at variance with the facts on the ground.
All right, we want to leave it here. Thank you so much for agreeing to speak to us. Felix Ofosu Kwakye is aide to former President John Dramani Mahama.